I'm Katie Couric. New bloodshed as Iraq marks a deadly anniversary. Dozens are killed in a vicious bombing of Baghdad's oldest market. Tonight, Lara Logan is on the scene just as new details emerge of Iran's role in the never-ending violence. Say it ain't snow. A lot of us will soon be seeing the white stuff. Let's hope it's not the 12 feet this town in upstate New York got. The American spirit, a former Wall Street executive, makes a long-term investment in other women. And getting some shut-eye at the office, the health benefits of napping.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Hi, everyone. Another terribly violent day in Baghdad as Iraqis remember the brutal bombing a year ago of one of the holiest Shiite mosques. Terrorists struck Baghdad's oldest market. At least 78 people were killed and over 160 were injured. Our chief foreign correspondent Lara Logan was on the scene in Baghdad.
Even by Baghdad standards, today's multiple car bombing in the city's biggest market was catastrophic. Smoke blinded survivors in the first moments after the blasts as they searched frantically for the dead and wounded. The force of these massive bombs set entire buildings ablaze, and Baghdad's firemen rushed to the rescue. They battled for hours to douse the flames as thick black smoke billowed into the air, looming over the center of the capital for hours. From the safety of the heavily guarded green zone nearby, the Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki was marking the first anniversary of the bombing of a holy Shiite shrine just moments before the attack. The loud explosion got his bodyguards' attention, but he doesn't miss a beat. That's in contrast to the chaos a little over 2 miles down the road. Burned-out cars piled on top of each other. Shops, stalls, and warehouses turned into a sea of rubble, debris filling a massive crater left by one of the bombs. It took at least a dozen armed guards to escort this Iraqi parliament member as he visited the scene.
We are not going to give up. We will continue fighting those terrorists wherever they will stay, whatever they are going to do.
Today, those terrorists obliterated Baghdad's oldest and most popular market. Buildings here in the market are still on fire 4 hours after these 2 car bombs ripped through the area. And rescue workers are still trying to remove bodies from the wreckage, while in the hospitals nearby, the dead are still being counted. For the many wounded who flooded the city's miserable, overcrowded hospitals, the horror isn't over yet. The shortage of medical staff, medicines, and equipment means more will die. You could see the shock and anger in the faces of both Iraqi policemen and civilians at the scene. Some blamed America, while others cursed the Iraqi government, asking, where is the new security plan?
Lara, let me ask you the same question some Iraqis were asking. Where was the U.S. presence, particularly since we're hearing so much about these additional troops?
The simple fact, Katie, is that there are not enough U.S. troops in Baghdad to police every street in the capital. And even when all the additional troops are here, that will not change. There are only a fraction of the additional troops in the city at the moment, and they have to let the Iraqi security forces take the lead in these kind of emergency response situations. Given the emotion and animosity at the scene of a heavy attack like this, it's probably best left to the Iraqis.
Lara Logan reporting from Baghdad tonight. Lara, thank you. This latest attack can't help but feed pessimism here at home about the chances for stopping the violence in Iraq. A new CBS News poll out tonight shows that 2/3 of Americans do not believe the U.S. military can stem the fighting between Iraqi factions. Meanwhile, the Bush administration has gone public with its charges of Iranian meddling in Iraq. Our national security correspondent David Martin first broke this story weeks ago, that the U.S. had proof that Iran has been supplying Iraqi insurgents with deadly weapons. Iran's denying it. The White House is stepping up its allegations, and David has the latest.
These specially shaped charges have triggered an increasingly high-stakes standoff between the U.S. and Iran. Today, Iran denied accusations by U.S. officials in Baghdad that these deadly devices were manufactured inside Iran. The State Department spokesman responded with some decidedly undiplomatic language.
The Iranians are up to their eyeballs in this activity.
The diabolic genius of the device, which has killed 170 coalition soldiers so far, is the concave lid. When a vehicle triggers an infrared motion detector, the explosive charge propels the lid, which changes shape in flight into a molten slug able to penetrate the thickest armor. It is a sophisticated killing device, which makes a cruel mockery of the term U.S. officials first used to describe roadside bombs, improvised explosive device, IED for short.
Just one by itself is enough to cause catastrophic damage. They're the most lethal form of IED that we've encountered here in Iraq so far.
Iranian expert and CBS News consultant Reza Aslan has no doubt it comes from Iran, and no doubt Iran is capable of much worse.
If Iran truly wanted to see Iraq become a failed state, it could unleash a level of violence in that country unlike anything the United States has seen before.
Aslan thinks supplying the devices is Iran's way of saying, if you want us to stop, let's talk. Despite rumors of war heightened by sending a second aircraft carrier to the Persian Gulf, Aslan says chances of a diplomatic solution are not dead.
The great irony of all this is that this ratcheting up of the militant rhetoric from the United States may actually lead to an opening of negotiations.
But officials say one of the arguments against holding talks with Iran is that with the war in Iraq going badly, the U.S. would be negotiating from a position of weakness, Katie.
David Martin at the Pentagon tonight. Tomorrow, the House will begin a 3-day debate on a non-binding symbolic resolution stating its disapproval of President Bush's Iraq troop buildup. But our new CBS News poll shows a majority of Americans wants Congress to go even further. A total of 53% say Congress ought to block funding for additional troops or for the war entirely. Meanwhile, there's encouraging news tonight on efforts to disarm North Korea. Negotiators in Beijing say a tentative deal's been worked out that could lead to the first real progress after years of stonewalling. We want to bring in our chief White House correspondent, Jim Axelrod. Jim, is this really the breakthrough negotiators have been working towards?
Well, it could be, although they're not exactly there yet. But yes, there is an agreement, a draft agreement, which will now be considered by all the parties in those so-called six-party talks that are designed to halt North Korea's nuclear weapons program. Essentially, North Korea would shut down its nuclear reactor within 60 days, and inspectors would be able to return to North Korea to monitor its nuclear program. Now, in exchange, North Korea would get electricity and 1 million tons of fuel oil, which the North Koreans desperately need.
And Jim, what's the next step?
Well, the big question now is what kind of shutdown would North Korea undertake of its nuclear reactor? In other words, would it just be a freeze, or would they allow the reactor to be somehow disabled so it couldn't be so quickly and easily restarted? That's what we need to keep our eyes on now, Katie.
All right, Jim Axelrod reporting from the White House tonight. Now to the weather. A big part of the country is bracing for a huge winter storm. The Midwest could see blizzard conditions tomorrow, with parts of the East Coast facing a foot or more of snow by Wednesday. That is the last thing they need in Redfield, New York. They're buried under 12 feet of snow. Kelly Wallace, who's becoming our expert on the subject, is right in the thick of it.
When you get this much snow, someone's got to keep track of it.
We'll take several different ones, average them together.
That's Carol Yurden's job, the unofficial weather watcher of Redfield, New York, population 650.
But you really enjoy this.
Well, nothing else you can do with it, you know.
So a couple of times a day, Carol takes her yardstick and heads to her deck.
So you come out here, right? You clear it all out, you stick your ruler in, and you record?
And I record.
146 inches since last weekend, according to Carol. That's 12 feet 2 inches, enough to nearly cover her in-laws' barn, submerge her son's swing set, and block the view from her first-floor windows. Enough also to give Redfield top honors for the most snow in the area in this storm.
Does it get a little competitive? You think, Parrish, you only got 115 inches. We got 146.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like that. Everybody wants to say that they got more snow than you did.
She takes her job very seriously.
And that brings us the season total.
Keeping detailed daily logs. Believe it or not, for a while this year, she had nothing to record.
You know, we enjoyed mild weather. Everybody was kind of joking, like, there's nothing here to talk about. And I was rather bored.
But she's definitely busy now.
I'm not fibbing. It's here.
And as crazy as this might sound, Carol's hoping more of it might be on the way. She says she's measured 287 inches so far this year, but Katie, she says that's far short of the record 420 inches she measured back in 1997.
And Kelly, it does sound crazy. Tell Carol I said so. Thanks, Kelly.
I will tell her that.
There's lots more CBS News ahead. Up next, the American Spirit, a woman who's investing in other women, and the return on that investment? Priceless. And later on, think a midday siesta is for slackers. We'll tell you why naps are good for your job and your health. CBS News in Focus, we continue our series, The American Spirit, tonight helping women get ahead. Just yesterday, Harvard named Dr. Drew Gilpin-Faust the first woman president in its 371-year history. With that, 4 of the 8 Ivy League universities will now be run by women. But nationally, women make up just 23% of college and university presidents. In business as in education, men continue to play a dominant role, but one woman is working hard to make sure others won't have to rely on the old boy network. Her story is tonight's installment of The American Spirit.
When somebody says, well, what do you invest in? I could say, well, you know, I own stocks or bonds or, you know, a mutual fund. But I say that I have invested in other women.
Janet Hansen knows a good investment when she sees one. For 14 years, she worked at the Wall Street powerhouse Goldman Sachs and became the firm's first female sales manager and eventually vice president. But when Janet quit to be a stay-at-home mom, she realized she was missing a lot more than her 6-figure salary.
I felt really cut off, and I felt a horrible sense of disconnection.
Things got bad. You got very depressed?
Yep. And so I sort of made a little promise to myself that if I ever kind of got it together, that I would start a network so that this didn't happen to other women.
She kept her promise, and what began as a way for her and 30 of her former Goldman Sachs gal pals to stay in touch has turned into a unique online global network of over 16,000 members. Their mantra? The only way to shatter the so-called glass ceiling is to stand on each other's shoulders. Women earn only 76 cents for every dollar a man earns. And that really hasn't changed much over the last 30 years. Why?
Women have to learn how to become better negotiators for themselves, which is hard to do. So they need to see other women doing that successfully. And the whole mission behind this network is that women cannot succeed if they don't leverage each other's massive intellectual firepower.
85 Broads, a play on her former Goldman Sachs address, 85 Broad Street, is one club that does discriminate. It's women only, and not just those looking for careers on Wall Street. Take the story of Bridget Altenberg, a West Point grad who did 3 tours in the Balkans, but after leaving the military, found herself in an unfulfilling civilian job. Enter 85 Broads.
So I emailed Janet and said, you know, do you have any advice for me? I think she emailed me back within 30 seconds and said, I will be your employment agent. I will find you a job.
Through networking with other members, Janet discovered Sears was looking for someone with Bridget's leadership qualities. And within 2 weeks, she had a job in the customer service department.
And I'm the director of operations, so just pretty powerful.
85 Broads also takes a special interest in students, with mentoring initiatives at close to 200 graduate and undergraduate campuses worldwide. You call it co-mentoring. Why is that?
Well, co-mentoring is the most respectful way to come at a relationship. I no longer wanted to see myself as a mentor, and because they were younger, that they were mentees. And so I said, let's start out as equals and go from there.
But if Janet needed proof of the true value of her network, it was when it became her own lifeline after she was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2002.
The emails that I got back from women in their 20s and 30s who had been diagnosed with breast cancer, with ovarian cancer, with cervical cancer. And I said, this is really why this network exists.
So this is a lot more than about how to get ahead in business, isn't it? That's really how to deal with life.
Right.
Janet says she has spent her entire net worth, almost $7 million, to create and maintain 85 Broads. But this former investment banker says it's the best trade she ever made.
Okay. I think people feel that perhaps that's foolish, because what's the return? What's the return profile on your investment? But it's really important to me, because my legacy will be proving to women that investing in each other is the only way to go.
If you'd like to make a connection with 85 Broads, you can go to cbsnews.com and click on FYI. By the way, tomorrow we begin a series you cannot afford to miss. Millions of Americans get sick every year from the food they eat. Is the government doing enough to keep contaminated food out of your kitchen? Beginning tomorrow, our special series, Safe Enough to Eat. When we come back, Campaign 08, Hillary Clinton faces tough questions while Barack Obama gets hammered by Australia's Prime Minister. That's next. Following up tonight on a story we brought you last week, the U.S. Postal Service is now warning thousands of financial companies to be on the alert for what's being called another potential Unabomber. Our Bob Orr reported that companies in Chicago and Kansas City have received bombs and threatening letters from a suspect calling himself the Bishop. The same suspect made similar threats 2 years ago, but remains at large. None of the bombs has exploded. The defense in the Scooter Libby CIA leak trial today called its first witnesses several big-name journalists in an attempt to show that several administration figures leaked the name of a CIA operative. Bob Woodward, Robert Novak, and others testified they first learned the CIA employee's name from people other than Libby, who was once Vice President Cheney's chief of staff. In presidential politics, Barack Obama spent today in New Hampshire. Just after announcing his candidacy this weekend, he came under fire from an unusual source. Australia's Prime Minister John Howard denounced Obama for proposing to bring U.S. troops home from Iraq next year. Hillary Clinton faced tough questions of her own in New Hampshire this weekend, with Democratic voters asking why she hasn't fully repudiated her 2002 Senate vote supporting the U.S. invasion of Iraq. And coming up next, the old saying, you snooze, you lose, has it all wrong. We'll set you straight next. Okay, everyone, tell your boss drifting off to dreamland during the day is actually good for both of you. The largest study ever on the health effects of napping is being released tonight, and it concludes that a half-hour nap just 3 times a week lowers by a remarkable 37% your risk of dying from a heart attack. Now nap breaks are catching on in even the most hard-charging businesses, and Richard Schlesinger found out why.
I think it's probably better.
At the Strawberry Frog ad agency on New York's Madison Avenue, their commercials are high velocity and high volume. So why is this employee sleeping? And what's that she's sleeping in?
Take a quick nap in the middle of the day. The effects are really dramatic.
You heard right. This agency that does $250 million a year in business is being urged by a salesman to become one of the latest companies to embrace napping on the job.
So if she's snoring, hopefully the person sitting over there won't really hear it.
Just because you're working all day does not mean that you're going to get good productivity out of your staff.
Joe Pugh, who was one of the managers, had one of these downright futuristic napping pods installed in a corner of this busy office.
Somebody might come in with pajamas.
Maybe they will.
Would that be okay?
That would, I think, be fine.
Set a timer.
The people who installed Strawberry Frog's pod run napping rooms of their own. $14 for 20 minutes. Their sales pitch to reluctant bosses: employers let workers take smoking breaks, so why not sleeping breaks?
In other countries, this isn't such a...
They got the siesta, you know, the siesta in Southern Europe. You know, places don't grind to a halt just because people are having an afternoon lie down.
It looks like it's catching on here. One study of 24-hour companies shows more than 15% encourage napping during work hours. And our time-lapse cameras didn't have to let a lot of time lapse before Joe Pugh's colleagues started using the nap pod.
We all slow down at various points in the day. It's the time that we look at the nearest couch and think, if only. Science shows that having a nap can revive a tired mind, and so does history.
JFK, LBJ, Eleanor Roosevelt, and Leonardo da Vinci all napped and did pretty well for themselves. Maybe the most famous napper was Winston Churchill, who used this bed in his underground command post for his daily snooze. Of course, Churchill won World War II, while all these people want to win is more business. And Joe Pugh quickly became a pod person herself, because this could be Strawberry Frog's secret weapon. Richard Schlesinger, CBS News, New York.
I'm all for it. That's the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Katie Couric. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you again tomorrow. Good night.